The Stranger at Sunset. The stagecoach rumbled down the dusty trail, its wheels kicking up amber clouds that glowed beneath the dying sun. The wide Texas horizon stretched endless and raw, the kind of land that swallowed the timid and tested the brave. Inside the coach, a young woman sat clutching a worn carpet-bag as if it were her only anchor to the earth. Her name was Clara Whitfield, and she was on her way to meet a man she'd never seen, the man who now called her his bride. She had answered his advertisement out of desperation, not romance. Back in St. Louis, the factory closed, her landlord demanded rent, and her father's debts still haunted her doorstep. The letter from a rancher named Eli Cartwright had been a lifeline. Strong hands and a kind heart wanted. Marriage by choice, partnership by faith. But now, as the coach drew near the Cartwright ranch, Clara's hands trembled. Her throat felt dry as dust. What if he was cruel? What if he only wanted someone to cook and clean, or worse, someone to control? The driver's voice broke her thoughts. "Ma'am, this is the stop." The coach lurched to a halt. Clara stepped down, her boots sinking slightly into the red dirt. The ranch sprawled before her, acres of rolling grassland, a white-fenced corral, cattle grazing under the fading sky. A large barn stood sturdy in the distance, its roof painted the color of rust. Then she saw him. Eli Cartwright emerged from the shadow of the barn, tall, broad-shouldered, the sort of man the land itself seemed to have built. His hat cast a low shadow across his face, but when he looked up, his eyes were startlingly gentle, a deep blue that carried both storms and stillness. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward her with slow, confident steps. "You must be Miss Whitfield," he said, voice low and warm, carrying a hint of amusement. "Welcome to Cartwright Ranch." Clara tried to smile. "Yes, sir. It's good to meet you." He tilted his head, noticing how her fingers tightened around her bag. "No need for sir, Darlin. I ain't your foreman." His eyes softened. "And I don't bite, except—" He let a slow grin curve across his mouth. "When a woman asks nicely." Her eyes widened, and heat rushed to her cheeks. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. He chuckled, tipping his hat. "Easy there. Just teasin'. You look like you've had a long ride. Let's get you settled." Inside the ranch house, everything smelled of cedar and fresh bread. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the sound of it filled the silence between them. He showed her the small bedroom he'd prepared, a handmade quilt, fresh linens, even a vase of wildflowers on the table. "You did this yourself?" she asked, surprised. "Wasn't gonna let my bride walk into an empty room," he said simply. "You deserve better than that." Her chest tightened at his words. For months, no one had thought she deserved anything at all. And here was this quiet man, offering her space, respect, and something she couldn't quite name. That night, Clara lay awake listening to the wind hum through the fields. She could hear Eli moving about downstairs, humming low, feeding the fire. The fear in her chest began to loosen, thread by thread. Maybe, just maybe, this place could be home. Firelight, fear, and forever. The next morning, the sky stretched wide and bright, dusted with gold. The rain from the night before had washed the land clean, leaving the air sharp with a scent of wet sage and sun-warmed soil. Clara woke to the sound of roosters crowing and the rhythmic thud of boots on the porch below. She hesitated before stepping out of her room. The soft dress she wore, a faded blue one from St. Louis, clung to her like a memory. She'd worn it the day she left everything behind. Now, in the quiet of Eli's ranch house, it somehow felt like the start of something new. When she walked into the kitchen, she found Eli at the table, reading an old newspaper, his coffee steaming beside him. His hair was still damp from the pump outside, and the early light caught the edge of his jaw, making him look younger, and somehow even more dangerous to her heart. "Mornin', Clara," he said without looking up, his voice deep as gravel. "Hope you slept well." "I did," she said softly. "The bed's comfortable. And thank you for the flowers." He folded the paper, his eyes lifting to hers with a half-smile. "Figured a lady deserves something pretty to wake up to. Can't let the wildflowers go to waste." Her heart fluttered, caught off guard by his thoughtfulness. "You make it sound like you picked them just for me." He leaned back in his chair, crossing one boot over the other. "Maybe I did." The silence stretched warm and teasing between them until she laughed, shaking her head. "You're not what I expected, Mr. Cartwright." "Good," he said, taking a slow sip of coffee. "'Cause I reckon you ain't what I expected either." The rhythm of ranch life. Days passed, each one carving her a little deeper into the rhythm of the ranch. Morning chores, feeding the chickens, hanging laundry under the wind. She rode out with Eli sometimes, the sun painting his shoulders bronze, the smell of horses and dust filling her lungs until the world felt simple again. One afternoon, she lost her balance while mending a fence and scraped her hand on the wire. Blood welled up, bright against her pale skin. Eli was beside her in seconds. "Hold still," he murmured, taking her hand gently. His thumb brushed the cut, his touch firm but careful. He wrapped her hand with a strip of cloth torn from his shirt. "You don't have to fuss," she started. "Darlin', that's part of the deal," he said, eyes glinting with something deeper than humor. "You're mine to look after now." The word sent a tremor through her, not fear, but warmth. She looked at him, the sun behind his hat brim turning his eyes into blue fire. For the first time, she didn't flinch from the idea of belonging. Later, when the wound had dried and the sun began to fall, Eli led her horse home, walking beside her instead of riding. No one had ever slowed down for her before. Not her father, not the men in the city who'd looked through her like she was air. Eli Cartwright walked with her. That alone was enough to undo her. The storm within. That night, as thunder grumbled far off in the hills, Clara sat by the fire, sewing a tear in her skirt. Eli came in from the barn, shoulders wet from the rain, the smell of leather and wood smoke following him. He set his hat on the rack and crouched near the fire. "You've been quiet tonight." She kept her eyes on the fabric. "Just thinking." "'Bout what?" She hesitated. "'Bout why you sent that letter. You could have chosen a woman from town. One who wasn't so plain." Eli's brow furrowed. "Plain? Clara, you calling yourself that's near sinful." She blinked at him, startled. He leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "You got fire in your eyes when you talk about something that matters. You work hard. You listen. Ain't nothin' plain about that." Her throat tightened. "You hardly know me." "Maybe not yet," he said softly. "But I aim to." Lightning flashed beyond the window, washing the room in silver. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the air thick, the silence alive. Then Eli stood and fetched a log from the basket, tossing it onto the fire. Sparks flared, crackling between them like unspoken truths. "I didn't send for a wife to have someone bow to me," he said finally. "I sent for a woman who'd stand beside me. And I figure you're her, if you'll let yourself be." Clara's needle paused mid-stitch. Her heart pounded in her chest. "I'm trying," she whispered. He nodded, eyes soft. "That's all I need." The dance of trust. The following evening, after the rain broke, Eli found an old fiddle in the attic. "Belonged to my ma," he explained, brushing dust from the strings. "She used to play when the nights got long." He played a few rough notes, rusty but heartfelt. Clara couldn't help but smile. "Sounds like you need a partner," she teased. He grinned. "That a volunteer, I hear?" Before she could answer, he reached for her hand. His touch was warm, calloused, sure. He pulled her gently into the middle of the room and began to hum a tune as he swayed. She laughed. "Eli, I can't dance." "Sure you can," he said, his hand resting at the small of her back. "Just follow my lead." The world narrowed to the sound of his heartbeat, the firelight flickering gold across his face. Her fear melted away, replaced by something wild and alive. He twirled her once, her skirt brushing his leg, and she felt her heart stumble. When the music stopped, he didn't let go right away. Their foreheads almost touched. Neither spoke. Neither moved. Finally, Eli said softly, "You fit here better than you think." Her voice trembled. "I don't know if I'm ready." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll wait. I'm a patient man, when the woman's worth it." And in that moment, she believed him. The day of the preacher. 3 days later, the preacher arrived on horseback, an older man with kind eyes and a Bible worn thin from years of travel. He dismounted at the porch, dusting his hat. "Mr. Cartwright," he said, smiling. "Heard you wrote east for a wife. Seems you found her." Eli looked to Clara. "That depends on her answer." Her pulse quickened. "You still want me, After all my fears and fumbling? He stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek. Darlin, I wanted you the minute you stepped off that coach looking like you were ready to bolt but too brave to run. The preacher cleared his throat, smiling as he turned away politely. I'll fetch my book. The ceremony was simple, a Bible, a vow, a kiss under the open sky. The cattle lowed in the distance, the wind carried the scent of rain and earth, and when Eli said, I do, it wasn't just a promise. It was a lifetime. When Clara spoke the same words, her voice didn't tremble. Not this time. Afterward, they sat on the porch, watching the sun sink over the land. The sky turned the color of fire, the air humming with crickets and the soft clink of Eli's coffee cup against the rail. So, she said quietly, I suppose I'm a rancher's wife now. He chuckled. Reckon so. But don't let that title fool you. You ain't here to serve me. You're here to share the ride. She leaned against his shoulder, her head finding its place like it had always belonged there. I think I finally understand why you said you don't bite. He turned to her with that familiar teasing glimmer. Except when asked nicely, she whispered, smiling up at him. His laughter rumbled deep and low. Careful, Darlin. That sounds like an invitation. She blushed, but didn't look away. Maybe it is. The porch light flickered as night took the ranch. Inside, the fire burned low, throwing soft shadows on the walls, two people sitting close, two hearts learning to beat in rhythm. Epilogue, under the Texas moon. Weeks passed. The fear that once haunted Clara's eyes faded like dust after rain. She learned the land, how to move with its rhythms, how to read the wind, how to laugh again. And Eli, for all his teasing charm, treated her as something rare, not fragile but precious. Sometimes, when the sun set blood-red and the wind whispered through the grass, he'd wrap his arm around her waist and murmur, Still glad you came? Every time, she'd answer, More than ever. And though the world beyond the ranch would never know their story, the land did. The wind carried their laughter. The stars bore witness to their vows. And somewhere in the stillness of that vast Texas night, two souls, a lonely cowboy and a frightened bride, found something stronger than fear.